My brothers and sisters in Christ, it's been an object of headlines in the Catholic blogosphere for many days now, and the ongoing, not so much dispute, but the controversy surrounding the Los Angeles Dodgers, their hosting of Pride Night, and the particular role played by a group known as the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, a LGBTQ drag group that dresses as Catholic nuns that, despite portrayals of it just being meant for humor, has a long and storied history of openly mocking Christian faith, portraying Jesus as a pole dancer on the cross, of sexualizing images of Jesus and Mary. Their website, I've never been to, but apparently says, "Go and sin more." And so it's a group that is openly mocking of Christianity. And so the role, I don't need to rehash the whole story, was that this group was invited after outcry from many groups of the church, including some Catholic politicians. They were disinvited from the festivities due to the offensive nature of it to Catholics. But then, due to pressure from the LGBTQ lobby, they were re-invited again. And now many, including some Catholic baseball players, are stepping up, speaking of how unhappy they are and how much they disagree with this decision. I share this because this has been the controversy of late, and it spotlights many of the things that happen around this month of June that gets highlighted in secular society as Pride Month. As Catholics, of course, June is the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. But all of this spotlights how difficult it can be to live as a Christian in a hostile culture nowadays, not just in the sense of being targeted or oppressed, but how difficult it is to stand actually for what is right by our faith in a culture that sees it as bigoted, offensive, something to be silenced. But for this reason, I find today's feast day on the church calendar, that of Charles Lwanga and his companions, to be a very inspiring and consoling one. Falls on June 3rd every year. It's the story of the Ugandan martyrs from near the end of the 19th century. And the story of it is a story of a corrupt king who was voracious in his sexual appetites, to say the least, and constantly lured all of his pages to his bed, whether they were young as the age of 13, or whether adults, but constantly taking all the young men of his court and luring them to his bed. And the story of this comes about as those that were catechumens, those who became baptized, began to resist and to try to save others from being lured from the king. The king grew outraged and had the head of the pages put to death. Charles Lwanga himself then was baptized and took over the instruction of the other young men in the faith, continuing to baptize them, and eventually a whole lot of them were set for execution and were martyred for standing fast for rejecting the king's overtures towards depravity. But all of this is not a way of talking just about in this culture battle, but to speak of the steadfastness, as the martyrs always do for us, to speak of not only the courage for standing what is right, but also the spirit in which it is done. And you'll find in the story of the Ugandan martyrs, there's no hate, there's no violent opposition to those that are caught up in this wave of immorality. Instead, there's just the holding fast to what is true on their own part. And even as this decision cost them their lives, famously, one of the young men on the road, a priest was weeping openly, and the young man asked, "Father, why are you weeping? I'm going to the very joy that's been promised to all of us that you taught us about." And so I find the examples and the irony that this feast day is always on June 3rd and what has become Pride Month, a month that highlights the tension between the faith and the culture today, as a reminder to not only stand fast to our faith, to not give in to prevailing culture, but to do so lovingly and joyfully, not by taking up offense or turning violently in rhetoric towards brothers and sisters who disagree with us, who see a different way of life, but to constantly witness to the gospel through our joy and through our loving witness. It's not called to, crank up the temperature in culture war, but to stand fast to our conviction and to love our neighbor. That is what we are called to do. And sometimes if that costs us something, we can stand by the faith of the saints who have gone before us, especially the saints of Charles Lwanga and his companions, the Ugandan martyrs, who are a reminder and for that reason are patrons for those against sexual exploitation and the famous story of the immorality that went on in the king's court. And so we invoke the prayers of these powerful saints, asking us that we may be faithful, resolute, and loving in our witness to the world in this month to come. May God bless you all.